Yes, that one was good. Future of the island home.
Dig up your rope here.
Right for you, Michael.
Select the top two at church.
I don't like it.
We don't have Joanna and Peter's going to Good afternoon. Call to order Finance Committee meeting, 4 p.m. Thursday, January 5th. Peter McEachern emailed me he will be a little late. He had another meeting, and I have not heard from Joanna Rhodes, so I don't know if she'll be here or not. But we do have a quorum, so we'll move forward. A reminder that this is a live recording, and I know we get video. We certainly get audio, so just be aware of that. Any public comment for items that we're not going to discuss on the agenda today? Seeing none, we'll move into approval of minutes from the 19th of December's meeting. Pleasure.
I'd sent a note around. I think there's actually, I'm actually misidentified in a couple of spots in there.
Okay.
And I thought they were going to maybe, did they get changed?
So those are corrected?
Those are corrected.
Chance to actually
Oh, okay.
Should be in the updated packet, I think you said. Did
It
you
is
send them out the updated one?
Some of you might not have seen, we'll keep that version next and we can approve it.
Pending them getting your name
Yeah,
right,
it's
are you okay?
Pending
Yeah, it's a minor
correction.
thing.
Motion
Just,
to approve that?
So
Second?
Second.
Minutes, any objection? Minutes approved. We're going to now jump into reviewing and discussing citizens' article petitions for the warrant. I'm going to take them in the order that they were sent to me by Catherine or through Catherine through the town. The purpose of doing this is to give an opportunity for those citizens that have put forth a warrant for consideration at town meeting to help us understand and acquaint us with the purpose, the rationale, so it'll hopefully improve our decision-making process. We will not take any action today on the articles, but I do believe that we have scheduled such that we can take action at our next meeting, so that's just an FYI. That doesn't mean we will, but it will be on the agenda in the event that it's the pleasure of the committee to do so. So, without further ado, Catherine, you've got one, two, well, however many you have. Why don't you address them? And if you would come up to the microphone, introduce yourself, and
Catherine Stover, 5 Liberty Street. The first petition that I put in was for 4 ballot questions. The first of all, which I think is the most important, is whether the town shall even vote to use public land to lease to a private, a non-profit funeral home. So I think that's the most important one to answer. You don't get everybody at town meeting, but you get more people at an election. And I think a non-binding referendum question is always helpful for making decisions. And if the people vote for it, that's great. We'll just continue. I'm happy to do the work, as I said before, many times. But if the people vote no, then I can stop swatting away at this time after time after time. So, and then the next 3 are the sites that Andrew Vorse helped me to identify that might be available. The first was if we move the island home, to put the funeral home there. The second is when we move the fire department, put it there. The third one is between 2 and 8 Tacoma Way, which is across from the Fairgrounds restaurant. And that is a piece of property, town-owned property, that's not earmarked for anything. So those are the 4 ballot questions.
okay. questions for Catherine? Discussion? Comments? Jump in.
Yeah, we give recommendations, but when it comes to non-binding questions, it always throws me because I don't think we should, it would make it more biased if we said yes or no. It says, how would we word that? Do we just pose it to town meeting and say, this is non-binding? Have at it, we have an explanation?
Well, I think, and I could be wrong about this, but I think it would be to take no action, which would be a neutral position. So we can take an action in the form of a positive motion, we could take no action, or we could take action which is not to support the article.
Okay.
I think we have to take one of those three positions.
That's
Well,
why I say the question always comes
This won't
up.
appear on the town meeting. It won't be called at town meeting or anything. This is going to the ballot.
Well, let me ask you a question, because reading Section 18A, I had some questions about the timing and who actually has to approve it. I understand that it's 35 days preceding the election. It has to be placed on the ballot,
Yes.
and that it has to have the approval of the mayor where so required by city charter, by vote of the Board of Selectmen of a town,
Yes.
or by vote of town council of a town having a town council, or by vote of the annual town meeting. So my reading
Well-
of it was that you had to go to, this, if it was going to advance, had to go first through town meeting.
No. It goes to the selectmen. The selectmen construct the ballot, and they're the ones that place the questions on, if they approve.
So if the selectmen don't approve, then it's a
Then it
moot
won't go on the
point.
ballot.
Pardon me?
Then it will not go on the ballot.
Okay, so you're going to approach it through the form of going to the selectmen?
Yes.
Okay. So that answers your question. I guess we don't have to make a,
I mean, just,
go
I think
ahead.
I'm guilty to Lily here. So that particular article ends up not being an article, is what we're saying.
Correct.
It's really just.
It's a petition
the
for ballot
petition
questions,
that go
yes.
onto the ballot.
So it's not going to appear on the warrant.
No.
I just have a quick question. Would you be opposed as to broadening this to any nonprofit?
It's a nonprofit, just a nonprofit funeral home.
Right, but I'm saying the concept of the town leasing the land, let's say this does pass, would you be amenable to changing the language to apply to any nonprofit? So just taking out the word funeral
No, I
home.
would not.
You would not?
No. We got a special act so that we could have a nonprofit funeral home.
Yeah, I understand that. So if you made a deal with the town that said in this ballot, the town can lease land to a nonprofit, then you would qualify as a nonprofit. But then let's say a housing nonprofit or any other nonprofit could then potentially lease land from the town. That's not of any interest to you?
That's got nothing to do with a funeral home, though. I mean, I can't see a nonprofit, like a housing organization, running a funeral home. You have to have certain parameters in order to do that.
Right,
And
I
that
understand.
wouldn't qualify.
Yeah, I guess I misstated my question. I'm more speaking to the general idea of the town, the town using, leasing its land to nonprofits for specific uses outside of funeral homes. So to me, this is what this ballot kind of opens up, is the potential for this type of thing to be done by the town.
No, I don't see it that way at all.
I mean, I think that's a positive thing, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think that's beyond the scope of what I'm asking.
Okay.
Certainly, the town has the freedom to do anything they want with their land. They can lease
Understood.
it to anybody.
Yep.
Yeah, so I don't think changing the language of the question to open it up to all nonprofits, this is specific to a funeral home.
All right.
All right, so so-called Article G, non-binding ballot, goes away. We're left with H, I, and J,
Yes,
which will be on the warrant.
yes.
Okay, so can you take us through the rationale on those? What, if any, cost you see to the town on these properties, so that
Well,
we have a
unlike
good- 'cause,
the,
obviously, I mean, if the selectmen don't vote to put it on the warrant, on the ballot, it's a moot point. On the other hand, these articles will show up.
Yes. Unlike the Sparks Avenue property that had a clouded title, it was going to cost the town some money to clear the title and take the land. These properties are already owned by the town, and the title is clear. So this would be a decision, that people could weigh in on where they would like to see the property, how they would like to see the property used for a funeral home or not. And I'm happy to take direction from the people. That's why I'm doing this. So I don't see, I don't know what any cost would be until, we actually explore that further.
There's probably it's probably an opportunity cost is what we're talking about. If you did X at the Island Home site, you couldn't do Y. So, there is a cost associated with that.
I don't understand that, Cliff. I don't understand that, what you just said.
So there's an opportunity cost of doing one thing over another. And that opportunity cost may favor doing a funeral home or it may not. So I'm not, no prejudice in my question. It's just there is an opportunity cost. So, for example, take the fire station location, if it becomes available. The opportunity cost would be providing it to your entity versus selling it on the open market for X.
I see.
So that
Okay,
the
I
foregone
understand.
opportunity is whatever the open market value is of that property.
I see.
Now, it may be a different case on our Island Home because that may in fact never reach the open market. But
Oh, I would hope not.
No, I have no reason to believe one way or the other that will happen. But that's what I mean by
Okay,
opportunity
I understand
cost.
that. Okay. Well, I guess I can't speak to the opportunity cost because I'm not a land developer, so I have no idea what the opportunity cost might be. I can tell you that the emotional cost for the families and the residents here has been pretty high. And financial costs, in the sense that all this money is going off island, is pretty high too. And we've had 223 deaths since Lewis is closed. So if you figure just $1,000 going off island per funeral, that's $223,000 that's gone off island. So none of that stays here.
Joe?
The next three articles, Catherine, or I don't know, if town meeting votes on them and votes in the affirmative, is that directing the town to take that action to transfer the land, or is it? Because I've always gotten a little confused. We've had a couple of these articles over the years, not only for your project, Catherine, but other people. Well, I guess largely yours, but where there's to see if the town will transfer the land. But and even if they voted for it, nothing sort of happens until your entity comes into existence, if it does. So,
Well,
I'm not clear
we
what
are
this
in
article really ends
existence.
up doing.
we are in existence and we have been for almost 3 years now.
But
What you're saying is it won't count until the funeral home is built, but we don't have land to build it on, so that comes first.
well, I actually think your idea of having a non-binding referendum is a good one, to find out whether there is public support for your
Yes.
project or not. So I actually think that's a good direction. To have these three articles then on the town meeting warrant, that's going to happen before the vote. Seems to me some people are going to be confused as to, well, so what are we supposed to vote for? We're going to vote for the one we like the best and then vote for it again on the...
Yes. Because, I mean, the people, you have more people at an election than you do at town meeting. So you might have 2,000 people at the election and only 500 at the town meeting. So you could have 300 people vote for one site, and then on the ballot, that you'd have 600 people voting, no, we don't want it there. And as you said, Mr. Worth, opportunity cost, perhaps people would see the opportunity cost in a particular site as something they would rather go after than having a funeral home there. So I think it's kind of a belt and suspenders type of thing where you have a vote at town meeting, and that gives the selectmen guidance about, which site they were going to go for. But then also, the ballot question will say, well, we do want this or we don't want this. I think, as I said, number one is the most important. Shall we even do it? I mean, that's up to the people. The people are the deciders. This is their land. If this is how they want to use it, then tell us. If you don't want to use it that way, tell us that too.
No, I think if that's how, I've never seen this work this way, but I mean, the island homes are perfectly good. Maybe this is a model for the island home to answer some of the questions we have there.
So, Catherine, I have no idea whether there's any agreement or not on this. Would you, since you're asking for a non-binding referendum, which or opinion, which does identify the 3 sites that you've indicated, would you be amenable to, and you also do have the hurdle of getting the selectmen, although you could go to town meeting with this and just have to wait a while, of just going with your ballot, if you will, on to get the sense of where the community stands on this, while at the same time we gave a negative recommendation on specific sites, so that A, there's not confusion, and B, that you get a sense of the community and then come back if you've got the sense of the community behind you, then
Well,
with a
I think
site.
going to town meeting, of course, people that are in favor of the funeral home will come to town meeting and they'll vote for it. But then on the ballot, it could be completely reversed. So I think the discussion has to be had. I think people are looking to get this done. But perhaps only the people that are looking to get this done will show up at town meeting, and the people that don't want to get it done will vote at the ballot. So I think it's an important thing to have both.
So, but when it comes to town meeting, you would have to deal with each one of these properties separately because you're not including the non-binding opinion on
Correct.
town meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to look at a way that it strikes me that, and this is just one opinion on the finance committee, that indicating that one site is preferable over another, or that any of the 3, without really knowing what the opportunity costs are, and potentially tying the town's hands without knowing A, what we want to do with the site of the skilled nursing facility, which may be in fact rebuild where it is, or the fire department, or the other locations, is tying the town's hand without really, and potentially tying up property for quite a while the rest of this gets sorted out. And so anyway, I'm trying to work for something that works for you that also doesn't end up tying the hands of the town.
I don't think it will tie the hands of the town. What it does is it tells the selectmen that yes, the people are interested in this particular site or not. The selectmen at that point vote to lease it or not.
Well, I'm not quite sure that's what your article says. I think it says that it's held for the purpose of conveyance, all or any portion, for the specific purpose that you identify. So,
Right, yeah.
I mean, it's very clear, if I'm looking at 2, 4, 6, and 8 Tacoma Way, that particular article, that if town meeting were to say, yes, we support that, that the town couldn't do anything else with that property.
Well, it's not earmarked for anything else. There's affordable land, affordable housing earmarked for some of that property over there, but this is not earmarked for anything.
understood, but it may be in the future, and there may be a different use that the town wishes to engage in. And this
Yes.
just ends up, tying
Well,
up the
if that's the
property.
case, then the people have decided that that's where they want it.
So,
Okay.
if I can just
Yeah.
interject, that's why I asked my initial question about maybe broadening it to just, the referendum could just say, well, just let me finish first.
I understand what you're saying.
But it would address his question. Do you not agree?
I do not agree.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Catherine, what would be the effect of town meeting voting that they'd like to see a funeral home on one, two, or maybe all three of these properties, and then at the ballot, it fails. At the ballot, the general electorate doesn't like the idea. Are these properties
Then
still
I'm done.
bound?
No, I'm done.
Okay, but
That's what I need to know.
But are the properties bound? I mean, maybe your
No,
efforts
they
stop.
are not. If I don't pursue it, it's not bound.
Okay, but it seems to me the Board of Selectmen would still be bound to hold, for the purpose of conveyance, all or any portion of those properties for a funeral home. So you wouldn't, without some action, maybe by a future town meeting, how do those properties get released and available for some other use?
I think it dies at the ballot, right, doesn't it, when something like
No.
that happens?
Well,
No?
that- the ballot's non-binding. I guess I hadn't quite thought that through. I think it just dies. I don't think. I mean, if you never pursue anything, there have been properties that we have earmarked for bike paths or whatever, and they just never came to pass. I can't think of specific examples right now, but I can certainly look them up. There have been things that we've wanted to do in the past, and we just never followed through.
Right, but not following through would be to say that we're going to leave the property vacant. So if you want to use it for some other purpose, and the property's being held for the purpose of a funeral home, and now we want affordable housing there,
Yep.
we have to come back to a
I thought of
future
an
town
example.
meeting? Okay.
The Sparks Avenue property. Originally, those 3 lots were voted, actually, the back one was voted for school housing, and then they decided not to use it. So, and then the 3 properties, adjoining properties, were voted for cemetery purposes, and then they didn't do anything with them. So then I brought forward the article to use one of them, and the other 2 would go to the cemetery. So that's one example where it was bound for one, or not bound, but voted for one purpose, but then the purpose changed.
Okay.
So we just need counsel to verify that for us, basically?
Yeah, I think opinions are great, and this is the proper way to get an opinion from the town. But if at the ballot it's decided that the town doesn't want to proceed with any nonprofit using town land to have a funeral home, I would hate to see us not be able to do something like expand the affordable housing project here on Tacoma, or whatever else we might like to do with any of these properties. But assuming, your recollection
I understand.
is
I think
correct,
that would be
then-
great to ask town council.
Yeah, great.
Okay, any other questions for Catherine? Catherine, thanks very much. Appreciate
You're welcome.
coming.
Thank you for the time.
Appreciate
Thank you.
your always rapid responses to questions. Next up, Mr. Glowacki, I believe.
Yeah, hello all. So,
Would you just identify yourself, Mike?
yes, Mike Glowacki. I live at 1 Dock Rider Drive, and I've served in various capacities in local government through the years. And I don't want to really be redundant. We had an introduction a few weeks ago on this. I think most of you guys were here. I thought it was a fairly innocuous thing that I was putting forward with the growing complexity of just about everything the town is involved in, that we think about a basic separation of powers. And I put it forward in the context that people that I've been talking with that are sort of serious people that do a lot of thinking about these kinds of things, there seems to be a fair amount of chatter going on about can we do better structurally on the executive side and on the legislative side, and it's really not about a particular issue. We got a little bogged down the last time I was here onto some recent specifics, and we can do all that if y'all want to, but my idea was pretty much just conceptual. It's separation of powers. Since that time that I was here, I've had a fair amount of feedback, and the moderator circulated some comments out of the forum and then subsequently circulated that spreadsheet. I believe did that come from the moderator?
No, I talked to Mass Municipal Association and generated it, so.
And before that, the moderator had sent out what was going on in the moderators' forums, and I don't know if the committee has all seen that document or not, but I think it would be useful and helpful. What I gathered from it was that it's the smaller communities and the smaller budgets, such as they are, that have a system where the Board of Selectmen appoints a finance committee, and maybe that's an oversimplification, but if that does get around and you all get a chance to look at it, that the larger, more complicated, and if you look at those municipalities, town governments that are generally held up as being well-run towns, Brookline and Concord and some of the others, they've been through the same thing. So I put this forward really with the idea that there's change coming somehow or other in how our government is structured. And if you look all you got to do is go to the coffee shops in the morning, and the demographic and the makeup of the island has changed a lot in the last not too many years. And that's going to be shaking through, and we're going to have to figure out whether there is some talk of maybe we consider a representative town meeting and how that works out with precincts and population represented. And my thought is that if we don't sort of start thinking about it and get in front of it, that it's going to be a little bit like we witnessed sort of nationally. Someone's going to tap into the frustration that builds, and we'll end up with radical change. My own opinion is that open town meeting is probably something we want to preserve versus a city form of government where you have a council elected that is making the big decisions. You don't have a chance to directly participate. But also, I do believe that we need to do something on the executive side as well, where we need to, 5-member board carrying out the executive function for the town is a little bit cumbersome. And I think for the size and the complexity, it's not a bit about who the people are. It's just a bit about to have 5 people, hash everything through and comply with your various open meeting laws, and you get bogged down pretty quickly. So I believe we need to separate the powers. I believe we need to town meeting to be effective needs to be very sure that it's in control of the information it's getting, is very independent. I think I don't see legal counsel here this evening. I know in the past, under different representation, that there were issues where it seemed as though the legal advice varied from one forum to the other, and information does come in and can affect things. But I think town meeting needs to be sure that the advisory committee is completely independent of the executive side, and that the legal opinion is completely independent of the executive side, and that will sort of unshackle town meeting, if you will, is why I put it forward. And so I know we'll be talking about it at town meeting. There's been quite a bit of feedback and comments since I was here last, and I believe there will be 1 or 2 candidates in the upcoming election talking specifically about the structure of our government. I think it's going to be topical, and I toss this idea out to see what y'all think. That's really that.
Great. Thank you. Comments?
Have you spoken with the moderators that we have now to see if that's something that they wanted to
I have spoken with the moderator, and the second half of the question was, does she want to do this?
Yes.
I believe the current moderator, from my personal conversations, and I think we'll be hearing from her at some stage, but I think she was careful to separate her personal inclination to what makes good sense for the town. And if you look through not only the spreadsheet, but the earlier letter and the survey of the town moderators, and you see the comments and see how few, well, it speaks for itself. So she can speak for herself. I can't really speak for her. Yes, I have talked with her before I put it forward. I was ready to be like, should I really not do this? And each person, I shouldn't try to characterize her view, I don't think.
Okay.
We'll drag her in here.
So, I talked to Mass Municipal Association yesterday because I was looking to actually get a more complete list, and that, I believe, you got copied on this.
That's the one that has some in alphabetical order, and then there's another section at the end? Or is that a different?
I thought I had sorted it so it was by who did the appointing.
I see that's where it's so, yeah, okay. The earlier one was alphabetic, and there were two
and this
blocks.
From my perspective, this is more easier, just because you can see all the Board of Selectmen and all the moderator.
And is there a separate block at the other end, or are they all, it's all one continuous?
Yeah. I mean, so Mass Municipal Association, they do not collect information. There are 300 towns that are that fit into this category. So we have 51 cities and other instrumentalities that don't have finance committees per se. City of Boston, they've got a finance group.
It's the towns with open town meeting,
yeah.
Or with a representative town meeting, yeah.
So anyway, it was an interesting conversation in that predominantly finance committees are appointed by moderators. The other thing that they said that's very unusual, and I'm interested in your comments about dealing with other parts of the government, because the comment that the woman who I spoke with, who sort of manages this, said, is that usually you see a change when you change your form of government. So if you were to go from, what we have to pick it, representative town meeting, that would be the time that you would tackle. That's how towns have done it. I'm not suggesting that's how we have to do it, but that was the information that she provided.
Right, and then actually that does trigger a few thoughts now.
So that was the feedback. I mean, some of these some of these appointments and statutes go back to like 1925. If you go in and dig in.
Yes, and we adopted our town charter in
96.
Yeah. And there was a certain tension in the air at that time, if you will, or a certain sort of approach. And prior to the town charter, an elected selectman could do about anything they wanted to. There was nothing. There was very little that limited. And we made several significant compromises, I believe, in order to pass the charter. We incorporated, and I don't want to get out of order here, we do a couple of things because there are political compromises to make some progress at the time. One is where we have our Board of Selectmen hearing the appeals for HDC, and I think everybody involved agrees that just doesn't work that well. It's better to go take that through the courts, and I think there's reasons why it was done that way in order to get going with an HDC. And similarly with the town charter, some things were just left not to have too many tug-of-war situations going on. Go ahead. So we have a town charter that prescribes that the Board of Selectmen appoint the Finance Committee, and I think that that seems to be inherently the opposite of separation of powers between your executive and legislative branches of government. And could cite examples, but it's not really about the particular issues and the examples as much as it is about what's coming at us 5 and 10 and 20 years from now.
Any other comments? I mean, I just from my perspective, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I really don't get where the conflict comes with the Board of Selectmen. I mean, I understand executive and legislative and all of that, but I don't. So I'm, Cliff, you've been on the committee longer than I have. I've been here 5 years.
Well, I haven't seen it from this Board of Selectmen, but I don't know if I was going to wait till later, but I've seen where boards have appointed members and unappointed members based on their opinion before. It's not that.
Yeah, but I mean, the moderator could do the same thing.
Yeah, isn't the risk greater with one person than with 5?
My own thought on that is that there's a clarity of accountability. With a 5-member Board of Selectmen, when it comes to appointment times, and we've got a pretty congenial thing sort of, rolling these days, and maybe you all had a great experience, and everything was just as it was appeared to be from the outside. But I've seen times in town government when the Finance Committee, the Airport Commission, the sort of more high-profile committees, and there's a little push and pull and some close decisions. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but those are public meetings, and you can see the deliberations between the members.
Well, sometimes you can and sometimes you can't.
Right, but you can never see it in the mind of a single person.
No, but you know who is accountable.
Okay.
You know it wasn't like, I voted this way.
But I know who's accountable, like, next term, when I don't get reappointed, I'm going to know who didn't vote for me.
You are, yes.
Yeah.
The public watching that.
And everybody else will, because it'll be in a public meeting. Everybody will know who didn't vote for me or whomever else,
Well, I would say to all, you go through a few more appointment cycles and you might see it a little differently.
I still don't think that answers the question of, isn't the threat greater with one person changing their mind than a majority of 5?
Right, and so that's something for everybody to think about. My own view is that it's very clear when it's one person, that person wanted to make that appointment or didn't. When somebody is appointed to a committee by a vote of 3-2 on the Board of Selectmen or 4-1, you don't really know. I mean, there were 3 in favor, but there might have been 5 in favor and 2 who just didn't want to alienate somebody else who's upset about this, and so I voted no and knew you were going to get appointed. I've seen quite a bit of that.
Right. So you're talking about politics that maybe take place outside a public meeting. One moderator can be solicited at any point, in any day, at any time,
exactly.
and not in a public meeting. And then they just make a decision, and town moderator doesn't hold any public meetings. They, I guess, would file some paperwork with the town clerk, say who's appointed and who's not, and people might not even know for months at a time. It seems a step backward, but that's one opinion.
Meeting down that end?
Thank you.
Mike, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
See you soon.
Next, Linda Holland had a couple of articles. Linda is not here. I have emailed Linda twice. At the same time, I've emailed everybody else. And I actually never heard back from her. I do have her correct email, and I've never got any bounce back. So, we can talk about her articles, but it's really pretty hard because it's not quite sure what's in her mind, unless there's somebody here who knows what she was intending. So, is that? Shall we pass?
Sure.
Okay. And finally, Mr. Allen, you have 2 articles, separate fire and police chiefs, and adopt MGL 48, Section 42. Mr. Allen here. So if you would take them in order, which is separate fire and police chief.
Sure. My name's Jeff Allen.
a member of the Nantucket Fire Department, been with them for about 20 years. So I want to thank the board for their patience. I know you and I had been communicating back and forth in emails, and finally was able to make the meeting. So again, thank you for your patience and understanding. I did a couple of position papers, and I may have been forwarded to you. And I figure for the rest of the board, I can read first the continuation of separate and police departments. So in order to maintain a progressive, independently funded, and professional fire department, the fire and police departments must remain separate. Several departments within the town have been combined, signaling a possible future direction. By addressing the issue now and requesting that this article be heard and voted on at the annual town meeting ensures no effort to the contrary will occur. The possible combination of the fire and police departments is of great concern to the community. Combining the fire and police departments to form a public safety department would negatively affect the fire department's budget, increase homeowners' insurance rates, limit firefighter career development, lower departmental effectiveness, increase attrition rates due to low morale, and negatively impact training and equipping personnel. Several departments within the town were combined to increase efficiency in areas where duplication may exist. There is no duplication of efforts within the police and fire departments. The police department is responsible for law enforcement, and the fire department is responsible for rescue, fire suppression, and emergency medical services. Affirming the continued separation of the fire and police departments will ensure positive and necessary growth of the fire department and its personnel under the leadership of the fire chief. And I had a couple key points regarding this. Just for clarification purposes, this is not an effort to oppose our potential future here at Fort Fairgrounds. Just so everybody understands that. We definitely, as I can speak for myself and some of the members of the department, we need a new fire station without a doubt. But this is not in opposition to that and being part of the Fort Fairgrounds facility. This will not also jeopardize continued cooperative relationship between the fire and police department's members. Fire and police department personnel have different goals and training needs that can only be preserved through continued separation of the departments. And in support of this, I have not only the International Association of Firefighters, I also brought a member of the PFFM, Paul Medeiros, with me in support, which is the Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts, member of the Chiefs Association, Chief Wynn, and this is also supported by, continued separation supported by the Police International Union of Police Associations, as well as the Chiefs. Any questions?
Can you share some of the background information that made you bring these articles forward? What conversations are you aware of that lead you to believe that the two departments may be combined?
I can give you the history, and some of you may have been on the board at the time. 2 years ago, I brought this to the board. And my concern was there was discussion going on within the town. Nothing specific, and oftentimes these are just kind of whispers down the hall. So my concern, was that we were going to move in that direction. The police chief was very adamant, spoke to the newspaper, said he was not interested in being placed in that position or had no intention of ever going in that direction. Recently, that changed, and I let that go because I thought the statement was made and it wasn't necessary to bring it to the town meeting because it was voted negatively against. But recently, I think it was in January, brought before the board, there was, pull it up here, and I think you have a copy of it. The January 14th meeting of this past year, 2016, there was a neat rebranding and renaming of the police department to the public safety department. And when I talk of consolidation or public safety, consolidation, you can kind of see, what's going on around here. The lifeguards, the marine department, the business licensing, communications, all are absorbed under the police department. Whether there's a direct effort or not, I don't think anybody would speak to me directly about that, but I feel if there's no effort in that direction, that voting to or proposing to move this forward would not harm anything. By moving in the direction of this, kind of further, you're not saving any money. And oftentimes municipalities, this goes back into the 50s, 60s, and 70s, municipalities look at consolidation efforts, public safety, to save money because sometimes same individual can wear several different hats. What it does is it creates even more levels of administration or bureaucracy that end up in the end pulling away from the fire department, and it's the fire department typically that loses in these efforts. So looking at that and seeing some of the consolidation that's gone throughout the town, it was my hope to keep the police and fire separate as they have been. I hope that answers that question.
It does. Thank you.
How has it affected dispatch as far as the calls and which calls go where and who's in charge of determining what calls are given to who? Is that a problem now, or is
to kind of give you a background in history without getting too deep into it, negotiations a couple of years ago, we gave up the right to dispatch our own. Typically, the fire department operated with 5 individuals. One individual would stay back and dispatch our own. Usually the call would be forwarded from the police department as it entered the 911 system. It would come over to us, and then we leave one individual off the apparatus to dispatch us from the fire station. We gave that up in the contract in order to, looking ahead, to get a separate dispatch situation, which really we were originally, shouldn't say promised, but assured that dispatch would be a separate entity unto itself. And what has gone on is that dispatch is under the police department, which typically is controlled by or administrated by the police department. So they decide which calls we go on. That answers that question.
So is it? I guess is that's what's pulled away from, as far as your concerns? Is that made your concerns more prevalent because of, you think that's affected it or not?
That was I guess that's an indicator. It's kind of like boiling the frog. These things happen slowly. It's not a immediate and over. All of a sudden you're just in that situation. But that was an indicator, because initially we've been led to believe that dispatch was going to be something shared, or to be separate police and fire side. That's not the case, at least in my opinion, and I can only speak for myself. But what I see is it's directly administered by the police department, and that our buy-in, we're less in buy-in, I guess you could say. So as far as calls, it would be dictated by the police department what calls we go on. And so when looking at that was an indication of potentially future directions. In addition to seeing the Marine Department absorb, the licensing absorb, the emergency management, which was shared between the police and fire chiefs, a new position created and absorbed. So there's been a kind of a steady movement towards the police department. Nobody said directly, and I don't think anybody would sit here and say we're taking over the fire department, but certainly there's indicators and hallmarks that you look for, and that we've seen statewide and nationwide of these kind of things. So I'd rather be in front of it than behind it.
Mr. Allen, excuse me, there's no proposal, is there, to do a consolidation?
Not at this time, no.
Okay. So, it strikes me that this is a little premature to even engage in this discussion. Mm-hmm. And we're fundamentally, if town meeting, or if we were to support your article, that we're basically tying the hands of policymakers without us having a discussion about it in the community. Mm-hmm. So from my perspective, it's pretty hard to support something that doesn't seem to be a problem. Mm-hmm. I think the consolidations that have taken place seem to have been done for efficiency and to save taxpayers money. So it strikes me that until such time as there's a proposal, that this article is a premature article.
I think the intent was to be ahead of instead of behind. Certainly, yes, you're correct. No efforts have been made.
We don't want to be, or I would not want to be in the position that now I'm fighting for my heels in an effort to then restrict that or try to limit that. I don't think there's any benefit in consolidation. There's studies nationally that have shown that there's absolutely no benefit. There's only one municipality in the state, and they're about to leave a consolidation type of situation. But I understand your position.
I mean, so fine, have the argument if there is a proposal to consolidate.
Mhm.
Your proposal does just the opposite, which is it does tie the hands of the policymakers by making an affirmation that the departments will be split.
Mhm.
Again, ahead of any public discussion. I mean, I'm sympathetic to your
Right.
to your issues. I just think that we're premature, and you're basically asking before we have a public discussion about it, or at least you're asking this body to make a positive recommendation that would tie the hands of the policymakers, of which we just heard Mr. Gowacki talk about being concerned about that very thing.
Yeah, and I completely understand your position. I think it was more, I guess, in my mind, looking to affirm what already exists. We already have a separate police and fire department. I don't think there's any movement into a consolidation effort, and it's just maintaining that. It's a non-binding, meeting, sense of the meeting kind of vote. Certainly that if the town were looking at down the line making that change, they could revisit this, because this doesn't I believe tie the hands. It's just saying that right now the town doesn't support it. We'd like to keep our police and fire separate. We think it's a good thing, and what's going on is a good thing. It's not to say that down the line that couldn't be revisited, because I don't think this in any way does tie their hands because of the non-binding, unless I misunderstand it. It's not as if it's a bylaw or a law change or something. So,
Okay. Any other comments? Great. 48, Section 42.
sure. Okay. And this is what's referred to as the strong chief law. I don't know if it would make more sense to read what the definition of Mass General Law 4842 would be. I don't know if the board is kind of
Did
aware
everybody
that I
get a
attached-
copy of the text?
I might have attached the additional, yeah. I just want to make sure, because I don't want to speak about it if there isn't an understanding, because the Warren article itself was very brief just in adopting that, but if that is there, that's great. So, again, a position paper, so to speak. In an effort to remove politics from the fire department and provide professionally trained fire service personnel with the necessary authority, the legislature enacted Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 42, the so-called Strong Chief Law, as enabling legislation. A town accepting this law establishes the fire department under the control of a chief that is appointed by the selectman and/or town manager. The fire chief appointed under this law is accountable and can be removed for cause at any time after a hearing. Adopting the Strong Chief Law helps assure leadership by a professionally trained fire chief that is knowledgeable not only in fire prevention and suppression, but also hazmat, emergency response to terrorism, emergency medical services, homeland security, and incident command as part of the National Incident Management System. Today, a fire chief attends programs such as the Executive Fire Officer and other advanced training courses offered at the Massachusetts and National Fire Academies. He or she must also demonstrate proficiency in leadership, organizational management, budgeting, labor relations, community relations, human resources, and a host of skills that are unique to the fire department operations. The sole focus of a fire chief is the safety of the firefighters and the public they serve. A town manager is not a professionally trained fire service manager. The position of the fire chief requires a very specific set of skills than those required of a town manager. Requiring a fire chief to report to the selectman and/or town manager on budgetary or similar issues is appropriate. The safety of the public and the firefighters dictates that the fire chief needs to have the authority to manage the daily operations of the fire department, including setting department policy, hiring, promotions, and disciplinary action. And some key points on this. Change to the town charter, if it's necessary to adopt this strong chief, would be welcome. I've had some discussion kind of going back on the history of this, because again, 2 years ago I brought this up, and had some discussion with, I believe it was John Giorgio, or Mr. Giorgio and Mr. Dolan, and they had mentioned the possibility of a change in the charter, though I've never seen any kind of supporting documentation regarding that, which I would welcome if town council brought forward something in writing that I could have reviewed and have our legal counsel review it. Also, Fire Chief Rood, Paul Rood, is not empowered to make decisions for the Nantucket Fire Department. Is considered a weak chief under the current town charter. All decisions regarding labor relations, hiring, promotions, discipline policies are either dictated or require approval of town administration. The decisions made by town administration place firefighting and the public at risk and will continue to do so if the change is not made to a strong chief. Fire Chief Rood is a highly educated fire professional and many years of dedication to the fire service. Chief Rood's training has provided him with an advanced set of skills necessary for running a fire department, ensuring the public's safety. Town management or selectmen are responsible for professional administration of town government and lacks the training and experience necessary to manage the fire department. And finally, again, support from Fire Chiefs Association of Massachusetts, Fire Chiefs Association of Massachusetts, and the Massachusetts Chief of Police Association support the adoption of the Strong Chief Law. In reviewing the town charter, and I'm not a legal expert, but it's pretty vague. There's nothing that I've seen that addresses the chief's authority directly. We came across some old information going back that was previous to somewhere around 96, I think it was, Paul, in that 91, that basically says that the chief is a weak chief. The language is a little ambiguous, and you know, in talking with the town's attorney at the time, and this was 2 years ago, this is Jack Dolan, said that the special acts of the legislature relative to the Nantucket Fire Department confer on the chief much of the authority that the strong chief statute would confer. I haven't been able to confirm that as existing at all, and the only thing we can find is language to the opposite, which is the chief is a weak chief. So, I think that's...
Perhaps could you maybe tell a little bit, describe a little bit what would be different between the current situation here in Nantucket in terms of the roles and responsibilities and how the fire chief does his job as a weak chief, and what changes would occur if this was adopted and the position became a strong chief?
The difference is, and it's kind of, when I get into here, hiring, promotions, discipline, policies, those are not dictated currently by the chief, and he has to seek approval through the town, my understanding. He would then, if placed in a strong chief position, be making those decisions. Any decisions regarding, and it's, pretty clear, or I shouldn't say pretty clear, but it's within the Mass General Law. Any decisions regarding finance would have to go before the Board of Selectmen and town manager as far as approval. As far as discipline of the chief, that would still be covered, would be under just cause, but there would be this disciplinary process. So this isn't a position where the chief is placed in a position where he just rules the roost and there's nobody who has authority over the individual. Currently, that's not the case. Anyway, but it would give the chief the authority to make the decisions for his department instead of attending board meetings and other meetings to request decisions be made and have to, I guess, funnel the decisions through that.
So basically, if I understand you correctly, it would basically add certain HR, human resource, and personnel responsibilities and authority to the chief's role versus what he has today, where many of these things have to be So
Either
approved
through
by the
town
town or at least
administration.
done in conjunction with town administration?
Correct. Correct. So the chief would be the ultimate decision maker for his department, and I can't think of a better person to do that is the chief of the department. Understanding that, because that's what their training is in. Regarding decisions of, it's not taking it out of the hands of human resources, so to speak. I would want to say human resources is removed, town administration. You're still conferring and working with those individuals, but they're the point, I guess, making those decisions. It's not the chief asking town administration and human resources, whether the decision can be made or not. You're head of the department. You're making the decisions for your department, barring any major disasters. That's your responsibility. That's what you were hired for as a professional.
Okay. Joanna?
So who's responsible currently for airport safety?
Not us.
Airport.
Including
The
fire,
airport.
including fire.
We respond in a mutual aid capacity to the airport,
Mutually with who?
to the airport itself.
Okay.
So the airport has its own fire service, or fire suppression, managed under their leadership over there, and we would then be in a capacity where we back them up or support them or provide mutual aid. If there was a plane crash, we're invited to assist in those capacities. They don't have ambulances; they have crash trucks. We have the ambulances. We have extrication tools, other things that more specific that may be used at that time.
Is there an example in recent time where the fire department wasn't allowed to hire somebody or do some HR procedure where you felt like you were blocked?
I can't speak for the chief, but I can speak for, yes, that recently decisions regarding policies, hiring, administrative decisions, those are.
Yeah, could you use examples, please, rather than...
The chief currently has to go through human resources as far as hiring of employees, so that would be a specific example.
Does the police chief have to do the same thing?
I'm not aware of what the
Yeah, I think he
police
does.
chief does.
Yeah.
I can't speak for the police chief. So.
But if
I
someone,
mean, to Joanna's question, please.
if someone was so if you put forth a candidate that was fully qualified, the HR department would say no?
It would be the decision of the HR department of the town administration to make the decision, not the chief himself to make the decision.
Currently.
What's that?
Currently.
Currently, yeah.
Under the proposal, it would be the chief's decision.
Would be the chief's decision to make that.
And then I have one more question, which goes back to what Cliff was asking you about the calls that through dispatch.
Mhm.
Is what percentage of calls do both the police and fire department respond to?
You're asking me for a number that I could tell you that our brothers and sisters in blue are at a lot of our EMS calls, rarely at our, say alarm calls, which might just be a general fire alarm, things of that nature. We work jointly together all the time. We'll see them at a good percentage of them, but not all. So I couldn't give you an exact number, 50%, 75%. But
Is there, since the police department has the control of the dispatch, is there a review process? Like, do you review the monthly calls and say, hey, maybe we should have gone to these calls? Maybe you guys should have come to this call? Is there some sort of collaboration review?
I believe there is a little more buy-in now, but I can't speak for administration. I mean, I can only what I know anecdotally from the department. I know that there have been concerns, certainly, and they've been addressed, and then we're moving forward in addressing those concerns. But some of the concerns were that you're having a dispatcher do both the police and fire at the same time. And if we have a structure fire, say like we had at Marine Home Center, fighting fire with 12 guys, which on the mainland would have had 100 guys climbing over that fire with mutual aid, etc. You've got one dispatcher there juggling that, possibly a bar fight or domestic or something else. That's going to complicate things. And typically, and I can say for most municipalities, police and fire on the dispatch are separate and handled separately. Sometimes in some departments on the Cape, for example, they'll have a dispatcher that's with that group. So if I'm on group 3, I'll have a group 3 dispatcher. They know me, they know the group, they know the individuals in there, and they're just handling the fire side. They're not trying to juggle both. So we don't have that right now.
Is there any conversation about how to manage the calls?
I believe there is. I believe there is, under the new administration, there is conversation.
Where you guys are involved in the conversation?
More at the level of administration, typically as the chain of command would go, we would report that to, say, our captains, would then bring it to our deputy in chief and go forward from there. And I know there is a better chain of command or better conversation.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
You might have already gone over it, I might have missed it. How many towns in Massachusetts have a strong chief versus a weak chief? Do you know?
135.
Ta-
I believe there's 135 towns in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Yeah, excuse me. I think it's important. I'd like to know who's here, and if anybody is here who represents your union. I mean, these are folks that I assume I don't recognize.
Sure, can I introduce them, or should I have them?
Absolutely, and please their affiliation.
Sorry, my apologies. I didn't mean.
Chief Michael Wynn. I'm here representing the Fire Chiefs Association of Massachusetts.
So it was 135 out of 400 towns? Or
351 cities and towns in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. 55 of them are governed by mayors, so the mayor is the appointing authority. The remaining 135 are strong chiefs, and then somewhere in there is a blend between weak chiefs and a situation like I'm employed in, which is a fire district, where I answer to a prudential committee and a board of fire commissioners.
Okay, so please identify yourself so we can have it on the record.
Could you spell your last name?
W-I-N-N.
W-I-N-N.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I was just trying to get a feel on the current situation.
Cliff, I want everybody to be identified because we
okay.
clearly have
Okay.
out-of-town guests here. So,
Good evening, Paul Medeiros. I'm a Hyannis firefighter representing the Professional Firefighters of Massachusetts, who represents this district. I represent the 38 locals in the Cape and South Shore, South Coast area.
so are you the union representative for this for Nantucket?
No, but they're one of my locals.
So we are in your, whatever your nomenclature is, your district? Okay. So, Terry, did you get the individual's name?
Medeiros, M-E-D-E-I-R-O-S.
E-I.
And I'm also a Hyannis firefighter paramedic. I've been there for 26 years.
Great, thank you.
Also have the president of our union.
Shane Perry, president of the local firefighters.
Great, thank you.
These are just members.
Okay, all right, thank you. So, before I go back to Cliff, so we have somebody from the union, we have somebody from Mass Firefighters. Is this such a big issue that we should be blessed with this group of people? I mean, I detect there's something else going on here that is perhaps escaping us.
If it is, it's escaping me as well.
So they just happen to be here today?
Oh, no. I asked them to come here, but in support. Ulterior motives. They're in support. We've been in communication with them regarding the issues and looking ahead and different strategies and things like that. We want to get a better read because we're an isolated local, as we're referred to, out here on Nantucket. No mutual aid. We don't get to see our neighbors all the time. If I were over in Hyannis, I'd be seeing Yarmouth and all the different municipalities. So it's nice to be in direct contact with them, and we invited them, or I invited them to come along, just to be present, show support basically. And then if there are any other questions, they're also very knowledgeable probably more so than I am. I'm still understanding some of the issues, but they're certainly very knowledgeable, could answer other questions too.
Cliff, back to you. Sorry for the interruption.
That's all right. I was just asking how many towns that have the same form of government, I guess, with selectmen versus mayors and city councilmen. So is it pretty much a majority that have selectmen that have a strong chief? So I guess that was my question. Or maybe you don't know the answer.
I don't actually know the answer
Okay.
to that, of the strong select board to strong town manager to city council to mayor, form of governments in the Commonwealth. I do know that there's 351 cities and towns. I did some research in preparation for tonight's meeting, in case you asked. 55 of those are with a mayor form of government. 135 have a strong fire chief or strong police chief form of government, where the community's adopted Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 42. And then the remainder of the difference, I'll have to do the quick math in my head, 200 some odd communities, or 190 some odd communities, are governed by prudential committees or boards of fire commissioners, or a weak chiefs type of system.
And when you say they adopt it, I guess you can choose whether to have it or not to have it, then, obviously.
That's correct.
Okay.
A question for you. In your mind, what is the benefit to this? Like, top two things.
Sure. Thank you. First, I should have said thank you beginning to have the opportunity to speak. I think the two benefits for a community like Nantucket, or any community considering this, and the fire chiefs of Massachusetts, we pay very close attention to 4842 debates. We see them go both ways. We see communities that want to move their chief out of 4842, and then we see communities that want to move their chiefs into 4842. And we take the issue very seriously, which is why I'm able to come tonight, because the role of the fire chief in 2017 is even more dynamic than it's ever been. The top two benefits that I would see in a 4842 position, or the consideration of 4842, number one would be it removes politics from the leadership of the fire service. It lets your fire chief be the fire chief and allow the fire chief to make the decisions based on his or her education, experience, credentials, background, for the best interests of the community. This is a lifelong ambition and a lifelong career path for someone to become a fire chief. You don't wake up one day and say, I want to be a fire chief. It's like a CEO. You don't wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a CEO. You have to start someplace. The second benefit that I think that you see in a 4842 situation is you're allowing a professional to come in and know that the community has the support, or the support for that professional. The community is saying, we've chosen you to be our fire chief. We want you to lead our community in its risk assessment and public safety. You are our person. Other than matters of budgetary issues, run your fire department the way you think that's appropriate. The job of a town manager or a town administrator or a select board is so dynamic with so many different responsibilities. The fire chief under a 4842 system is allowed to focus on running the fire department.
So, would you address a couple of things? First of all, my understanding is that we essentially, with a strong chief, it's a lifetime appointment. So there is no ability, once you go to a strong chief, until that individual retires or moves on, that that individual exists in that position. And you're probably going to tell me they can be removed for cause, which I understand is such a high hurdle that it in effect is a lifetime appointment.
Mr. Chairman, all due respect, I don't believe that statement is accurate. I believe the just cause parameters in the Commonwealth are very well defined. And what the fact of a 4842 situation allows for the fire chief is the community, if they're not pleased with the actions or the guidance that the fire chief is doing or offering to the community, has a process of using just cause to remove that fire chief, or the simple fact of choosing not to
Could you give me some examples of just cause, please?
Sure. Or the simple fact of not renewing the contract of the fire chief, in which case the fire chief is out of a job. That's clearly defined in the law. The sidebar to that, and I'll be happy to offer an example, would be in a 4842A, which is the weak fire chief provision, the fire chief is essentially dismissible at the pleasure of the community. Those are the differences. Examples of when a fire chief is dismissed is very clear. There's a very, very prolific case going on in southeastern Mass right now where the fire chief is under investigation for misappropriation of funds. That happens. The fire chief will be dismissed if he's found in error or guilty of those type of things. So the situations occur when the fire chief has caused some type of malfeasance, he will be dismissed properly.
But absent committing fraud, shooting somebody, or other clearly for-cause issues, once you go to a strong chief's form, you're basically going to be, you are going to have the chief that is currently in that position when you make the transition until they decide to leave. Right? I mean, you can have a contract, but, you know, if the Board of Selectmen at the end of the contract don't want to renew the contract, they have to do it for just cause.
No, sir. Incorrect. The contract cannot be, it can just be not renewed. And then that chief has 1 year under the Mass General Law, and his employment is terminated with the community.
You have a year after the contract
Correct.
runs
Once
out?
he's given written notice that his contract's not being renewed, he is dismissed after 1 year.
And currently, the contract that we have?
I'm not super versed in the contract that you have. I was here to speak about
3 years.
42.
The Chief, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. The contract I have right now says I can be dismissed for no cause immediately.
Mhm.
There is no 1 year, no term.
So you're an employee at will, which
I'm an
is
employee
what
at will.
you would be under a weak chief.
Exactly.
Yes. Which is what everybody else is in the town.
I'm not familiar with everybody else's, but
I mean, I think most everybody is an employee at will. Some, I mean, superintendent has a contract, and so, you know, if
What about the police chief?
he's an employee at will, I'm pretty sure. I mean, we don't have a strong chief.
Mm-hmm.
So your terms of your contract would have to be, you know, if you have a 3-year contract and, you know, you guys, the town and you part ways, or we part ways with an employee, we have a contractual obligation under the contract, but nevertheless, as an employee at will.
correct,
off you
they
go.
can terminate me at any time for no reason.
I guess what you know, I don't really understand why this is on the table. I mean, you're a professional. The town obviously went out and sought you for your skills and your capability and your experience. Mr. Allen indicated he read a litany of your experience. I don't understand how the town is. I mean, we put you in charge of this entity and this organization, and I don't understand why we would want to unduly tie the town's hands in a situation that there doesn't seem to be something broken here. And unless there's something that's, you know, underground with the fire department, you know, in the town, I don't understand where this is all bubbling up, and why we would further tie the town's hands, you know, in something like this.
Was that a question for me, or?
It's
ask
to
my
Mr.
opinion,
Allen.
or
He's the
ask
one
me
who's
all?
sponsoring the article.
I think that is the point itself. You've hired a professional, but on the other side, their hands are tied and unable to make the decisions that they're trained to do, that they've aspired to do, and that they truly are the best choice for making those decisions. Now, I can give you the history of our fire department. I mean, you were talking about employees, you know, potentially staying. Maybe things don't work out. With the exception, I've been under 3 chiefs, well, actually 4, kind of. This will be my 5th chief, 20 years. That's pretty unusual. But each of those chiefs left at the tenure of, at the time they want to retire, with the exception of Everett Pierce, who was asked to leave because of extenuating circumstances, let's say, without revisiting the past. Bruce Watts retired after his time. Mark McDougall retired after his time. The history going back to Gatsby, I think, or some others, they stayed their entire duration. So I don't think that's really an argument to prevent. You can remove the chief at any time, but I think if you're hiring a professional, you should let the professional make the decisions for their organization, not be buried in the politics and bureaucracy of the
Mr. Allen, I don't think the town is getting in the way of the chief's activities and actions. He's not buried in politics.
I think
okay? He's not being told who to hire.
Okay.
He has some budgetary responsibilities. He has probably our HR systems to follow to make sure that we are non-discriminatory in who gets hired and that appropriate procedures are followed. But I'm at a loss to understand where this is coming from, other than to have unfettered responsibility. And I look at the enabling legislation, full and absolute authority. He will report to no one, except periodically to the Board of Selectmen. And it's even questionable how much budget oversight there is. I mean, if he decides that he needs 5 new employees, who says yes and who says no?
I think going back to what Chief Wynn had said, I think it's very clear where the guidelines are and the general laws where they fall as far as that goes. He can be removed. He is limited. And, you know, as a professional, that is the individual that should be making the decisions. Now, it's difficult for me to, unfortunately, convey the firehouse. There's a culture. There's a way of doing things. I've been here for 20 years. That wouldn't be, in some jobs, that's not considered a long time. That's considered just warming up. But what I've seen over my short career, or my short 20 years, is that the chiefs have been hamstrung and have been unable to make the decisions they need to make in order to move the department forward. You and I may not see eye to eye on this, and I'll agree to disagree with you. I would welcome you to come by the firehouse someday, as anybody on the board, to see how things operate and to see where we're at. I mean, I don't want to get into a long, drawn-out argument on this, but I see it clearly. You see it a different way, but I believe that the chief, there's enough stopgaps or things within the Mass General Law to hold the chief back. If you believe they're getting wildly out of control, the town administration believes that the chief is uncontrolled. I don't see that as uncontrolled. I don't see that. I see that chief as being, you know, able to make the decisions they need to make, as opposed to being reined in on the decisions. So I guess it's different ways of viewing it.
It seems to me you're making the argument that the current system is fine.
What's that?
The current system is fine. That seems to me to be what the argument that you're making.
I definitely don't say the current system's fine. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be losing hair, spending a lot of time calling a lot of people and making making these arguments. If the system was fine, I would have just showed up to the station, gone home, and gone to bed, and that's it.
Mr. Allen, can you make the argument? I mean, you say you're making the argument, but you don't provide examples. What are the reasons that we need this?
I'll give you a specific, and I didn't want to have to go here. But
well, I think we need more than one specific. This is a big change.
Okay. I'll give you a specific, and the specific goes to a change in policy regarding the fire department responding to any sort of water-related call, whether it's EMS or whether it's fire or otherwise. We were told we were no longer in the business when the new chief came in, when Paul came in, that we were no longer in the business of being the responders for that. If there's a fire in the water, fire in the dock, et cetera, and so on, that is a change in policy. That was not a policy that any of us wanted, including the chief, but it was dictated that that was the policy that we were moving forward with, and we were not able to fight that or change that. Now that is the responsibility of the police department. I find it hard to believe that law enforcement should be in the business of marine rescue. That would be a very specific policy. I'm not prepared to pull out exact policy language and everything.
Can you do that? I mean, if you're not prepared today, but can you do that?
Not today, but I can bring it forward.
Yeah.
This isn't about the fact that there's a desire for a fireboat. Is this what's going on?
No. But
are you?
I mean, a fireboat is not something that I personally, and the chief and I will disagree on this. This isn't something that I feel is the most important thing in the department. I don't think the chief feels that way. I can't speak for him, but this doesn't go back to a fireboat. I mean, that's a very simplistic way of looking at it. If you were previously...
No, but it's an issue floating around.
What's that?
It's an issue floating around. No pun intended.
Sure. Absolutely. But you asked for specific, so I responded.
Is there a public safety committee? that is comprised of somebody from the fire department, from the police department, somebody from the Coast Guard, or somebody from the airport? Is there a public safety committee who addresses policy change or who reviews policy change?
I don't think we have anybody that
There
knows the
isn't.
answer.
I was, at one point, I was lifeguard chief for the island, and I brought all the agencies together, all the shareholders together, to sit down and discuss the different avenues and different responsibilities that everybody had, because there was a lot of overlap, there's a lot of jurisdictions, and there's a lot of turfdom that goes on, and was able to remove that, which was fortunate. Because everybody was on the same page, whether it was a dive team or whether it was the lifeguards or whether it was the Coast Guard or Marine Department, what everybody did. And that was years ago. That's the last time I know of any kind of public safety, that I was involved with or that I know of. So,
Joe?
Move on.
Henry?
Can I ask some
Oh,
questions?
please,
Just,
go ahead, Chris.
you alluded to some conversation with town council about whether this would be in conflict with the town charter.
Mhm.
Could you just take me back to that a little bit? Because
Sure. So I'll play back 2 years ago when I brought this forward. At the time, didn't feel it was something that the chief at the time or the administration at the time was going to support or was even interested in, and so I dropped it. But town council meant that had discussed that there was legislative acts that already gave the chief the ability of strong chief, which we discovered that is not the case in doing some research with the PFFM. But they also mentioned the town charter. I've yet to see anything that documents it or supports a change in the town charter. Just the mention that this would require the town charter to be changed. I would welcome any kind of language from town council written so that I can just have it to review with our legal. Would be great if that is the case.
that had come up in our conversation,
Yes.
and that there was an
Right.
issue with the town charter, that this
Yeah.
wouldn't be the right form.
The petition can't be approved. That's what he told us. The town council.
Right, it would put the bylaws in conflict with the town charter.
Yeah.
Right.
It
Well,
has
that's
to
what
be- He said it has to be a charter amendment.
Right, and so I just wanted to get a sense of what conversations they'd had on that.
Is
as well.
there anything written that supports that? I'm just,
I think
I'm asking because unless I see it, I've heard this oftentimes,
And
that something exists, but
I think you provided.
he did. Let me find it.
if there is, I'd love to have a copy, or I can probably reach out to town council and request it. There's something they have in writing.
We're looking, town council prepared a document that I thought you had, which,
Yeah, it would have
Johnny,
been
don't
part
have
of the meeting packet for the meeting following December 7th, so we'll be on the website, but you can email it also. Let's see. Oh, there's the wrong one.
He didn't rewrite it, he just said it was not.
oh, do you have it in front of you?
Yeah.
Would you mind reading it?
Oh,
So
sure.
just identify what it is, and this
Sure.
is from town council,
This
Mr. Allen?
is the town council review of the citizens' petitions, and the description of your petition is adopt provisions of GLC 4842 to provide for a so-called strong fire chief. And his comments are, this petition is not approved as to form because adoption of the strong fire chief law would require a charter change to provide for appointment of the fire chief by the Board of Selectmen and a change in the disciplinary procedures applicable to the fire chief. And just in my notes, I wrote that he said it would have to be a charter amendment.
I'll reach out to him for supporting
I mean,
documentation.
likely,
I mean,
you
that-
should have already shared that with him.
that's,
Yeah, I thought, it's a public document, so.
yeah. I mean, is that Mr. Giorgio or is that?
He was
Yes.
the one who presented it to us.
Okay. So I can reach out to him and maybe get an actual description because, saying it is one thing, but actually what supports that would be
Right, and to
Oh.
that point, if you could provide some documentation of other specific reasons why these changes are necessary,
Sure.
that would help me.
Would you like me to forward it to the board?
Yeah, forward it to.
Please forward it to me, and I'll make sure it gets distributed. Thank you.
The example you gave, it's a lot of information, but you said there was a fire on the dock or something. If the police report to fires, or they're given the duty to put out fires, is that infringing upon some mass general law, or is there?
There are mass general laws that relate specifically to the duties of firefighters and specifically to the duties of police officers. The duties of firefighters are as suppression, rescue, EMS. The duties under mass general laws of law enforcement or police officers is law enforcement. And it spells out that one shouldn't do the other.
Are you talking about the police, or are you talking about the Marine Department?
I'm talking about the police.
So Sheila has no role in
there is
from her Marine Department if there is a fire on a wharf or on a boat, or
there is other information that supports the fire department as being the responding agency under the Mass General Law. The Marine Department, specific to assisting distressed vessels, or if you're in the area for somebody who requires assistance, enforcement regarding shellfish and the like, I believe is the purview of the Marine Department. Beyond that, firefighting and fire suppression is the fire service.
okay, thanks. Anybody else? Mr. Allen, Gene, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Mr. Allen, you mentioned that there had been a change where the dispatching, you had given up control, or the fire department had given up control of the dispatching.
Mm-hmm.
How long ago did that happen?
Last contract. So just kind of to understand that, we operate with at most 5 individuals on a shift for 24 hours. Typically, at that time, what would happen is we were responsible for our own dispatch. So police would receive a 911 call, transfer it to us, and then a member of the department would stay behind to then dispatch apparatus, whether it's fire, EMS, rescue, otherwise. And then during the contract, because we felt it was important to get more personnel on the apparatus to actually respond, because we're so short-handed, that we gave up the right to dispatch under the understanding that the dispatch was going to be a separate police and fire dispatch, which was not the case in implementation. And that oftentimes dispatchers are burdened with dispatching both police and fire at the same time with the same person.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you very much,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Allen. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming. That concludes our discussion of the articles that we have. Unless there is an overwhelming desire down the road to revisit Linda Holland's articles, I will cease communication with her on this and let the planning board decide. But you may have a different opinion on this. So,
If she's not willing to come and speak, then we can't talk about much, but I would like the opportunity. So.
all right. Well, I will reach out to her again and see if we can get her to come with some slaughter in at a future meeting. Great. All right. I have scheduled the opportunity to have a discussion about the fiscal impact report that Richmond prepared for the town, comments there too. And I did it not because I want to see us generate positions and get them locked in and whatnot. And Patty, I see that you're here. Thank you for coming, and as appropriate, we'll involve you in the conversation. So.
I'm not prepared to speak. I haven't been invited to, so I'm here to listen.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to know that I acknowledge that you're here, and I would let you speak if you wish to speak.
I may raise my hand when I want the record to show that we weren't actually asked to speak, or...
Yeah, that's fine. Yep, great, thank you. So the idea is, we've been in various forms kicking around
the development that's taking place on the island, the impacts that are coming, whether it's to our infrastructure, be it sewer, water, fire, police, schools, and I know, I mean, this is such a large topic. It's a topic that's hard to get your arms around, and because it's a conversation that can go in a variety of directions. So, in all honesty, I have no idea where this conversation will end up. And if it only goes 5 minutes, it only goes 5 minutes. But I thought that this is our opportunity to, enter into a dialogue. I know this is a subject. Stephen, you've spoken about. Henry, you've spoken also about. Clearly, I have over the past few years. So, anybody want to kick it off? Anybody want to start?
I think I should disclose that I live in a development that abuts Richmond
Okay.
Great Point.
Well, we're not going to take any decisions on that,
Just
but I
disclosing
appreciate that.
No, I think you're bringing up a great topic because we have, it seems to be when it comes to planning and subdividing of land, I've never seen where they're taking into consideration where we're headed in 10 or 20 years and what it all means and what's it mean to the water, what's it mean to the sewer, and what's the end game. Even if it's positive or negative, what do we have to look forward to for the community?
And that, I think, goes to Stephen's comments of getting a build-out analysis and update.
Yeah, it seems that would be a good function of our planning department to let us know what our zoning portends for the future. I'm a believer that on a long enough timeline, whatever can be built on Nantucket probably will be built. These types of impact, economic impact or fiscal impact analysis reports are important, and I hope that this can be a model for what happens in the future when people come before town meeting and ask for special dispensation for zoning or for increases in density, that we see these types of reports. I think that with respect to this report, the most important thing is the thing that I don't have much understanding of, which is the infill or the echo percentage, I think they call it, which is the number of people who are moving from one area of the island to these new units as opposed to new people coming to the island. I don't know how best to estimate those numbers, but I think using this report as a model and thinking forward about how we can apply it to new projects that will inevitably come through the pipeline, that's an area I think that deserves the most scrutiny.
When we say we'd like to hear the planning department, have we spoken to the planning department? Are they excited? I mean, I don't think they.
Are they excited?
Well, I mean,
Based on the meetings that I've had, not particularly.
Okay. Well, I mean, there's the master plan, but then, I mean, at some point, Steve talks about we keep going to town meeting and subdividing. So with the master plan, is there ultimate plan that, okay, this section we're going to stop at this point, or we're just going to keep on?
There's the master plan, and then there's area plans.
Okay.
Last special town meeting approved upzoning a certain section of South Shore Road that was not designated in the master plan for upzoning.
Right.
But in the area plan it was. So, at some turns we're told that the master plan is the governing document, and then other times we're told, well, the area plan came later, so that's the one we're supposed to look at. I don't know, but whatever the policy is, I'd just like to know what the numbers are. I'd like to know where we're headed. So every time we make a decision, up or down on zoning, although they only really go in one direction, what we'll at least know what the additional number is, and we can make a decision based on that, or based at least in part on that. So, to your question, is the planning department excited about it? I don't think they probably have any feeling about it one way or another. But I don't
Exactly.
think that the request has been made by this body. I know not by this body, but I don't think the Board of Selectmen or anybody else has asked the planning board to do this type of analysis. So maybe we can add that to our next agenda to have this body consider making that request of the Board of Selectmen to, the Board of Selectmen can consider making that request of the planning department.
I have a question just about the report. So the purpose of this was to figure out how many additional students might be generated?
In part.
In part.
Yeah, in part. So a little bit of the background,
Please.
when the property on Old South Road came before town meeting for a rezoning, the town executed a memorandum of understanding with Richmond that included a number of stipulations, one of which was that Richmond would conduct a fiscal impact analysis of their of the impacts of their development upon the various town services,
Right.
schools,
Okay.
and the like. And that came at, I think, special town meeting a year ago last fall. Have I got that, Patty? And so they began work on it a little bit over a year ago. Well, basically December or January of 2015, 2016. Concluded it this summer, the end of this summer. This is the result of the work that they did. So they retained an independent consultant to do the analysis for them. Does that help, Patty?
I just wanted to add a couple of things. I'm Patty Roggeveen with Richmond Waypoint Development. The Planning Board did receive in September, as did the Finance Committee, as did the Board of Selectmen, a copy of our consultant, John Connery, who's done this type of analysis in many districts across the state and actually in New England, in September, did I say that, of this year. So they did receive, the Planning Board did receive that. They have asked for an independent peer review of that, which Judy Barrett is now conducting currently. So when those results are back in terms of a review of the current fiscal analysis, we'll be able to take a look at that. So I just wanted you to know that the Planning Board, I'm not here to defend them, but they do have those.
Just to be clear, it's the Planning Board requested the review by Judy Barrett.
I came to a Planning Board meeting, and during public comment, because there was so much disparity between your review and John's review, we wanted transparency. We wanted the public to be secure and to be comfortable. As you all know, it's not a requirement for the development, but we did very willingly undertake it for the planning purposes, as you've all indicated is an important piece of this. And we want to make sure that the public has confidence. We have confidence in John's analysis, but thought that we would make that a general request and offer to underwrite that as they would proceed to find a contractor of their choice. They selected Judy Barrett. She did the town's housing study, and she also did the, the housing production plan. So she has a pretty solid knowledge of the island at this point in terms of housing. And that was their choice, not ours. But we're distant from that, and I don't know what their answer will be or the timetable as of yet, but we're expecting something relatively soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it the late hour? Everybody needs a cocktail?
Yeah. Do you have any?
All right, so where are we? Stephen, we can put this on the agenda to ask, so we can formally take a position to ask the Board of Selectmen, to ask the Planning Board, and I guess can I ask you to come prepared with a motion that
You can, and I will.
Okay.
You know, I know there's talk of a strategic plan at the Selectmen.
Right.
Maybe you're doing, I haven't followed that conversation, but this would seem to be pretty, I don't know what the goals of that are, but I would think that what you're talking about would seem to be a pretty early on piece of that work plan, wouldn't it?
It would seem to be an important part of that plan, and I think that there's support from members of the Board of Selectmen for this type of analysis. But we have a department who's best qualified to do that analysis, and hopefully we'll get buy-in from that department, and we'll get some good numbers.
And you know that they're considering making that stretch of Old South Road like a diff? Do you know what that is?
Mm-hmm.
Right, so that they can, any increase in the tax base, any increase in property value over the tax base would be reinvested in just that area. Because I think that has bearing on this as well.
That's under policy discussion by the Board of Selectmen, and it may come forward as a Selectmen's article
at the town meeting.
And for us to have a discussion on, but it's not been decided yet, so it's premature to. But be aware that we may be part of that process. And I think, Brian, you were at last night's meeting. Are they going to make a decision next week or week after? Sorry if I'm putting you on the spot.
No, that's okay.
Town administration isn't here tonight. So.
The goal is to get back to them with some of the additional information that they had asked in terms of questions relative to the diff, hopefully for a further discussion on the 11th, because I believe they have to adopt the warrant on the 18th, or somewhere soon there. So I think we would hope to have the answers by the 11th. If not, the remainder answered by the 18th to make so they can make the determination.
So this may be coming our way pretty quickly.
But correct me if I'm wrong, whatever monies that could potentially raise could offset some of the impact. And that's the whole point of the diff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Great, thank you.
Except that I'm not familiar with the diff, but are you saying that it would go just to infrastructure improvements in the area? So then it wouldn't so then it wouldn't offset the general cost to everything else in this report. Schools, fire, water.
I don't know.
No, the diff is the district improvement financing, as the area is laid out, it's a tool and a mechanism to be able to fund infrastructure improvements in that that are relative to that. So it would, and what it does is that when you adopt it and you fill out your plan, you set the baseline valuation in the area that's been adopted, and the incremental valuation changes, then that revenue that's generated by the valuation changes over whatever life the diff is. It can be approved and implemented for a period of up to 30 years. So the incremental revenue that's generated, tax revenue from the increased valuations within that area, are typically they're used to fund infrastructure improvements that are a result of the development. So the goal of the diff in this scenario would be to be used to fund any of the infrastructure improvements in that area that are necessary.
So more road-based.
I'm not entirely sure what they all are, but I would assume that most of them are road-based, yes.
So it's a way of having an impact fee without having an impact fee.
Well, it's a dedicated revenue stream to support, so you could go out and borrow money to make larger capital improvements. And I assume that it does something to get around the issue of overrides and...
Well, it's an alternate funding source. Some of the questions that there's still some outstanding questions that have to be answered in terms of, the impact and the segregation of specific funding relative to that, and whether that's a policy decision the board wants to make because it's not something that they've used before, or whether we would rather fund the X number of millions of dollars that we would need for infrastructure via regular debt exclusions that do impact our debt limits. One of the advantages of there's some financing advantages to a DIF that may make it attractive, but those are all questions that we're working on still.
But there's the connection, because if we don't do the DIF, we have to spend more money to fix these other problems.
Well, you're spending the money one way or the other.
Yeah, you're not raising more money.
Yeah, you're not raising
no,
more
but
money.
there's a different financing mechanism in place. And also, there was something about grants being potentially...
Yeah, there is. If you implement a DIF, the potential is that you could be eligible for some other grants as well, based on having it. But those are all questions that the selectmen have asked that we're working as expeditiously as possible to provide the answers to them.
Great. Thanks, John. Anything
Anything else? Well, before we adjourn, our next scheduled meeting is for the 10th, which is next Tuesday. It will be at the cafeteria at Cyrus Pierce School, for those of you who...
It's actually been posted. It's actually in the LGI room downstairs. It's not in the cafeteria. So hopefully we won't have any of the vending or soda machines or anything like that, in the din in the background for everybody. So
it's at...
It's in the LGI room where the school committee normally meets at the school. Okay.
At Cyrus Pierce?
It's actually in
high school.
In the high school, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you go in the high school entrance, you just walk all the way to the back and then down the stairs.
So next week, I have invited Isaiah Stover and Tucker Holland to speak about the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which will be a separate article. It will be pulled out of the general fund. I believe, Brian, is it currently at $500,000?
Sorry. Yes, it's still at the 500,000, and I believe that the selectmen did agree that it should be a separate warrant article, if I remember correctly from their discussion.
So I've asked them to come. Hang on a second, Stephen. And then, but I have not heard back from Isaiah. So
okay.
Tucker said he'll do whatever he can. Go ahead.
Did we get any follow-up from Ken Bogrand about the CPC allocation for the window repair at Academy Hill?
He has. I saw him the other day. He has something for us. It's a capital item, so it was excluded from his. When they looked at it, it was I can remember what he said.
It's excluded from the terms of the lease, which requires them to. Well, anyway, we'll see what he comes up.
I'll see if I can get him to send something specifically written. So we're going to have the Affordable Housing Trust Fund next week, and then we are also going to do citizens' articles. Do we have enough time to add the request to the Board of Selectmen, Stephen's comments, in time for next week or not?
You mean posting time?
Posting time.
What do we need to add? We probably can make changes still to the agenda. For which agenda do you need to?
For next Tuesday.
What do you want to modify on it?
That a request be made by the Finance Committee to the Board of Selectmen for, I'll call it a build-out analysis. It may turn out to have a slightly different title, which would then go to the Planning Board.
If we can't amend the 10th, would it be amenable to the committee that if we were able to amend the 12th meeting and add it to that agenda?
On the 12th, that's fine.
Is that okay?
Yep.
If I can amend the 10th, I will, but is the 12th be okay? Okay.
I think we're probably talking about a work product for next town meeting anyway. So
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And then and I don't remember. I think Julia sent the schedule.
Yeah.
You all have the
I've seen
schedule.
that. Yep.
So the only thing that I would say is we are confirmed for the 28th, Saturday, 8:30 to 1. We will begin promptly at 8:30. We will be done no later than 1 o'clock. We've laid out a schedule, so everybody will be slotted in. Chief, you're scheduled for 9:15.
Thank you.
Saturday morning.
We'll be there.
Thank you. And Brian has committed that budgets will be to us a week ahead of time for review. So put it in your calendars. Well, hopefully it'll work out, and hopefully we'll have a good day. So,
have we had enough discussion on your article? Or we're going to speak about that again? Helicopters.
You're welcome to do whatever you would like, Cliff.
Oh, I didn't know if it was you were done.
Well, did you miss it? He made a presentation.
I did. Well, I saw that.
Oh,
but
yeah.
it was brief.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
I figure we'll let the planning board have at it. Is there any changes? I think that in the schedule, I think what we've done is I've tried to get a schedule that gets us through a lot of stuff. Once we have our public hearing, then we can start to make motions. But the idea here is that we basically do our work, our analysis, our questions pretty much before the public hearing, and then we can move into finalizing our motions.
And
I have a question.
yes.
Just about the Affordable Housing Trust presentation, only because I'm new. Are they, because I haven't seen, are they going to bring with them, like, what the money they already have they spent on and what this other money is for? That's
I
what they're
hope
going to
so.
tell us? Or are they going to, they haven't spent any. So they're going to give us a report on what they're doing. They're not going to give us that information in advance of the presentation.
Not to jump ahead, because we probably shouldn't be talking about this, but I would expect that,
I just don't know.
yeah,
what to
I would expect, I'm not sure what to expect either.
Okay.
I would expect that they're going to tell us they haven't spent the money. They're going to tell us what they're going to do and what the time frame is.
I didn't know if they would send us like a report in advance and then would have a conversation about it, or if it was going to be a presentation.
One could hope. I mean, I haven't even heard back from the chairman, so I emailed him in the beginning of the week. So anyway, anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you all very much. Gentlemen, ladies, thank you. Remind you, your microphones are probably still on.
I'm turning off the recorders as we speak.
I saw that. Very fast. Very fast.